delegates and participants. It gives me immense pleasure to be here to talk on a subject which I have been associated with about 25 years. We run the oldest and the largest marketing support agency in India, MART, and we have worked with about 4,000 NGOs over the last 25 years. But I will get into that specific issues concerning marketing with the non-profits in the afternoon session. I just thought that I'll use this morning, my 10 minutes, to really set the larger context, because in all humility, I dare say that I've spent more years in this than perhaps anybody in this room. So I just thought that I'd like to set the context. Social enterprise or marketing for non-profits really has its roots in the NGO sector. And therefore, it becomes important to understand the historical evolution of NGOs in India, which I'd like to just do in the next 2 minutes. Initially, we had the Christian missionaries, who were the Britishers who went and set up hospitals and schools in remote locations. Those were the early days of the NGO sector in India. And then came the Indian religious organizations. So we had the Ramakrishna Mission, the Vivekananda Society, the Aurobindo Ashram, and many of those, whose work was really to collect charity or to collect donations and then serve the poor. And thereafter, I think the biggest influence or the biggest impact was made by the Gandhian NGOs, because when Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa to India, in 1931, he set up the Khadi and Village Industries Commission, which incidentally is the largest marketing organization of its kind in the world. It has 8,000 retail outlets. It provides employment to part-time employment to 6 million people. Its turnover in India is as large as Unilever's turnover in India. And I had the good fortune of being the chairman of that organization for its marketing for some years, so I would share some of those experiences in the afternoon. When the country became independent, the first focus was on community development. So all the early organizations that were set up were the community development organizations, and the government set up the Central Welfare Board, whose purpose was to give money to these development organizations. It was really in the early 90s that the NGO sector started getting professionalized. And that's when MBA graduates from IRMA, from TIS, from many of these management schools started joining the NGOs. And some of the names you would even recall today, Vijay Mahajan of Basics, or Bankar Roy of Telonia, or Dr. Rajesh Tandon of Priya. Many of these people who are professional MBAs who had studied in the US, come back here. Development Alternatives, who's a partner here. Ashok Khosla studied in the US, was perhaps the youngest professor at Harvard, but came back and then set up this organization. And in the 21st century, we've now started looking at social enterprise. So the social enterprise, really, the early beginnings happened in the last 8 or 9 years. Okay? And that's where venture capital funding is coming in, and a lot of things are beginning to happen around this space. So historically, India, of course, has had a great tradition of giving. So we have the daan, giving to the poor, or seva, the service bhav, which is a part of our culture and philosophy. So since the NGO movement started from that stream, NGOs have never really got into marketing. When I set up MART in 1993, it's about 20 years now, profit was considered a bad word. Okay? And it took me many years to convince the NGO sector, and more particularly the government, and then I became the advisor to the Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India, that profiteering is a bad word, but profit is not a bad word. And unless you can sustain your operations, you cannot be depending on grant and subsidies. And this is what has happened in this country. Over the last 50 years, the government has been spending almost 5% of its GDP or more just on sustaining these unsustainable operations. So all that is beginning to change, because the young MBAs who are now coming into this sector, they want to set up enterprises that do good for society, which also hopefully does good for the organization, but equally importantly, they believe that their operations must be sustainable, so they must make legitimate profits so that they can continue to work. And I just want to leave this whole thing with a thought. I've had the good fortune of working in every kind of institution that possibly exists in the world. For the first 20 years of my professional life, I worked in the private sector with 3 large multinationals. The next 2 years, I worked with Development Alternatives, one of the largest NGOs in India. Then I was appointed as the marketing advisor to the Ministry of Rural Development, so I've worked very closely with the government. Then I have worked with the World Bank and UN organizations, so I understand the donor perspective. And I also got into academics, which I never thought I would, and I ended up writing a book also and teaching courses, so I've had exposure to the academic world. And for the last 19 years, I've been running MART, which is a for-profit marketing support agencies for the poor and for NGOs. So having seen it from all sides, I just have put together a concept which we have used to to found MART. Every organization we know has a mind. So when we say 3M is a great innovations company, or Apple is a great innovation company, and most of these companies then hire the best MBAs from the best universities across the world, particularly the US. What we also have to recognize is that every organization also has a heart. Okay? And if you map any organization on a mind and heart basis, the heart and mind could be either a social heart or a social mind, or it could be a business heart or a business mind. So the first kind of organizations are the NGOs. That's what we are talking about here. Now, NGOs are the do-gooders of society. They want to provide service. They want to care for the poor. Okay? So they have a lot of compassion, and they have their heart in the right place. But unfortunately, they don't always have strategic thinking, because they can't afford to hire the best minds. And therefore, their good work tends to remain confined and doesn't get scaled up. And when you get into the sector, you'll find the critical challenge is how do you scale up the good work? And unless you're able to do that, you're not able to benefit the larger society. Diametrically opposite to the NGO is the corporate. The corporate hires the best minds because it can afford to pay the best people, but it often has not a very compassionate heart, and its main interest is to make profits, however, from its customers. And then you have the government, and having worked in the government, with due apologies, I may say that the government often brings the wrong kind of heart and the wrong kind of mind, and that's why it doesn't often create the right kind of impact. Okay? Now, ever since the global meltdown, the corporate sector has been talking about green marketing, social marketing, CSR. So what are they saying? What they're trying to say is that we also have the right kind of heart, and we at least want to develop the right kind of heart, and therefore we want to now come into this space, which is a move away from the business heart to a social heart. Okay? That's what they're trying to do. What NGOs are saying is that we need to bring in marketing, because that's the only way we'll be able to sustain our operations. So therefore, we need to develop market-led approaches and strategies. So the NGOs are also saying that we will continue with our social heart, but we'll also bring in the business mind, because they want to move into that fourth quadrant. And the government, of course, is saying that we'll try and clean up our act and do it better this time. And particularly in this country, in the last few years, you would have noticed that the government has started hiring a lot of good minds from the private sector. So we have Nandan Nilekani, who's championing the Aadhaar program, the identification program. We have people like Arun Maira, the ex-chairman of Boston Consulting Group, who is now on the Planning Commission. I was a part of the government as a marketing advisor to the ministry as a professional. So the government is saying that we also want to bring in the right kind of minds so that we are able to create the right kind of impact. So therefore, What is emerging is what I call the business mind, social heart organization. And that's what a social enterprise is all about. It is a business mind because it must be sustainable, but it is for the service of the poor. So therefore, you have to have your heart in the right place and your mind in the right place. Thank you very much.